In the 1960s, many families faced economic hardships and had to get their creative grooves on. These dishes became symbols of poverty and the everyday struggle to make ends meet. The meals on this list captured the era, symbolizing not only hardship but also the resourcefulness of those who, in classic Americana style, prepared vintage family meals during tough times when food was scarce and the pantry was near empty. Chipped beef on toast, a true example of retro recipes and the good old days of vintage America. Chipped beef on toast was a staple in post-war households and the military alike, where stretching a budget or feeding a crowd was a survival tactic. Chipped beef, a salty, dried meat product, was cheap, shelf-stable, and available almost everywhere. Pair that with white bread and a homemade cream sauce made with flour, butter, milk, and a pinch of seasoning, and you had a meal that could feed an army, literally, for less than the cost of a burger today. Though not exactly a health food, chipped beef provided a decent amount of protein even if it was sodium heavy, while the caloric cream sauce added richness to the dish, making it feel more indulgent than it actually was. It's proof that a little resourcefulness in the kitchen could turn basic ingredients into something hearty and satisfying for many. It was a memory. Whether you were a soldier in the barracks or a kid at the dinner table, chipped beef on toast brought people together, one humble shingle at a time. Canned mackerel patties. These patties were a masterclass in creativity. By mixing canned mackerel with breadcrumbs, eggs, and seasoning, families transformed humble ingredients into crispy golden cakes that packed a flavorful punch. A hot skillet was all it took to create a meal that felt like more than just survival. It felt like an effort imbued with the care of classic Americana. Even a drizzle of ketchup or a dollop of mayo on top added that final touch of luxury, and surprisingly, mackerel brought solid nutritional value to the table, loaded with omega-3 fatty acids, protein, and essential vitamins. It gave kids the strength to grow and parents the energy to keep going. Sure, the aroma while cooking could fill the entire house, but at least you knew dinner was on the way. For many, mackerel patties evoke memories of resilience and warmth, a dish that reminds us how even the simplest ingredients could turn into a meal worth remembering. Slumgullion, poor man's stew. In times when budgets were tight and the pantry looked bare, creativity in the kitchen was essential if you wanted to survive. Enter Slumgullion, a dish with a name as quirky as its ingredients and a true example of vintage family meals and retro recipes. This one-pot wonder was less of a strict recipe and more of a philosophy. Take whatever you have, throw it in a pot, and hope for the best. Typically made with ground beef, onions, potatoes, pasta, and canned tomatoes, Slumgullion was affordable and easily customizable. Couldn't afford beef? Swap it out for hot dogs or skip the meat altogether. Low on vegetables, a can of peas or a handful of frozen corn would do the trick. It was the epitome of accessibility. Everything came straight from the pantry or fridge with no fancy ingredients required. Nutritionally, it offered just enough to keep everyone going. The mix of carbs from potatoes and pasta, protein from meat, and a splash of vitamins from canned veggies made it a practical, filling meal. Sure, it wasn't gourmet, but it filled plates, and that's what mattered. It's a dish that captures the spirit of resilience, turning scraps into sustenance and proving that even in hard times, mealtime could bring people together. Simple, humble, and undeniably resourceful. Stretching $1 in the 1960s, mock ham loaf. Often in the 1960s, creating illusions in the kitchen was necessary, and mock ham loaf was a culinary sleight of hand designed to mimic the flavor and appearance of ham without breaking the bank. Since ham was a luxury that many struggling families couldn't afford, resourceful cooks devised this dish using a mix of ground pork, ground beef, breadcrumbs, and a touch of brown sugar. For a dash of authenticity, a hint of clove or mustard might be added. It wasn't exactly Sunday dinner at Grandma's, but it fooled enough taste buds to pass as a treat. The ingredients, often leftovers or inexpensive cuts of meat, stretched into multiple meals, offering a solid dose of protein and calories despite its high fat and sugar content. Mock ham loaf is a true tribute to the ingenuity of retro recipes and the enduring charm of Americana. Cabbage hot dish. A favorite in the 1960s, the Cabbage hot dish was a one-pan meal that fed families without emptying their wallets. It was the epitome of frugality: a humble head of cabbage, some ground meat, and a handful of rice or pasta with perhaps a can of condensed soup or tomato sauce added to bring it all together. Cabbage was celebrated for its affordability, year-round availability, and versatility, adapting easily to whatever was on hand. Leftovers were fair game, making this dish a champion of resourcefulness. Nutritionally, cabbage provided fiber, vitamin C, and potassium, while the meat and starch added protein and energy. Though it might not have won over food critics, it did the important job of keeping families full and nourished. The aroma of a cabbage hot dish evokes memories of church potlucks, family dinners, and the comforting essence of vintage family meals in classic Americana. Milk and macaroni. Comforting milk and macaroni was the kind of dish you'd find on the dinner table when there wasn't much else to go around. It was minimalism at its best. Boiled elbow macaroni with warm milk and perhaps a pinch of salt or sugar for flavor. Some even called it the ancestor of modern comfort food. The genius of this dish was its accessibility. Pasta was cheap, milk was a staple in most households, and together they created a meal that fed families on a tight budget. With a few extra pennies, you could jazz it up with a sprinkle of cheese, a pat of butter, or even a shake of pepper. Nutritionally, it might not win awards, but it provided energy through carbohydrates and a modest amount of protein and calcium from the milk, stirring warm memories of vintage family meals and the golden age of classic Americana. Beans and cornbread. A lifeline for families stretching their grocery budgets, beans and cornbread were simple, hearty, and satisfying. A duo where creativity met necessity. Dried beans, a pantry hero available in bulk, were soaked and simmered into a protein-packed powerhouse that could feed a family for pennies. Cornbread, made from affordable cornmeal, water, and a little fat, was the perfect partner, soaking up the juices from the beans while adding a touch of sweetness to balance the earthy flavors. Nutritionally, the beans brought fiber, protein, and a host of vitamins, while the cornbread provided energy from carbohydrates. It wasn't a feast, but it was a balanced meal that kept people going, often elevated with a splash of hot sauce or a handful of chopped onions. This dish represents community and culture, particularly in the South, and remains a symbol of the resilience and resourcefulness of classic Americana. Ketchup soup. People had to get creative when it came to forgotten foods. One of the most surprising inventions of the era. Resonating with the nostalgia of Gen X and the retro recipes of yesteryear was something you wouldn't expect to see on any gourmet menu: ketchup soup. Yes, you heard that right. Ketchup, hot water, and maybe a little sugar and salt to taste. It was cheap, accessible, and served as a meal when nothing else was available. The affordability of this dish was its main selling point. Ketchup, a staple of vintage America, was a common household item, and hot water straight from the tap provided the perfect solution for anyone needing to fill their stomach quickly without worrying about cost. Sure, it may not have had the nutrients of a balanced meal, but it was a quick fix that offered just enough sustenance to get through the day. What makes ketchup soup even more interesting is the sheer creativity behind it. People had to use what they had, and in this case, ketchup proved to be a versatile base for something edible. Resourcefulness at its finest. You could even make it a little more substantial by tossing in leftover bread to soak up the liquid. Tomato sandwiches. When meat was a luxury and vegetables came straight from the garden, the humble tomato sandwich became an everyday hero. A couple of slices of bread, a fresh tomato, and a smear of mayo were all it took to create a meal that was as simple as it was satisfying. For families with a backyard garden, tomatoes were practically free, making this dish both affordable and accessible. Bread and mayonnaise, common pantry staples, transformed a juicy tomato into a full-fledged meal, and if mayo wasn't available, a drizzle of oil or even a sprinkle of salt could do the trick. This simple yet inventive dish is a reminder that sometimes the simplest combinations are the most memorable, steeped in the nostalgia of yesteryear and the retro recipes of vintage America. Peanut butter and mayo sandwich. Innovation bred in times of scarcity gave rise to the peanut butter and mayo sandwich, a surprising snack that became a staple for those with limited ingredients. The affordability of peanut butter, paired with the accessibility of mayonnaise, created a budget-friendly sandwich that could be whipped up in minutes. Peanut butter offered protein, healthy fats, and a satisfying richness, while mayo provided a creamy texture and a hint of tang. Though the combination might sound unconventional, it was born of necessity and proved that sometimes the best ideas come from thinking outside the lunchbox. This quirky sandwich is a testament to resourcefulness and a little bit of childhood adventure, firmly rooted in the retro recipes and classic Americana of yesteryear. Liver spread sandwiches. Sandwiches made with liver spread were as practical as they were emblematic of classic Americana. This affordable pantry item was a go-to for stretching meals without breaking the bank. Whether served on white bread or a slice of toast, the humble spread transformed into a meal that was quick to prepare and required little else. Liver spread was loaded with protein, iron, and vitamin A, nutrients many families in the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s depended on when fresh meat wasn't always an option. Although it wasn't the most glamorous choice, it was certainly filling. Many households would slather it generously on bread, sometimes adding pickles or mustard for a burst of flavor. It wasn't haute cuisine, but it got the job done. This dish carried with it a sense of nostalgia for those who grew up in the 1960s, a meal shared in kitchens from urban apartments to rural homes that epitomized the good old days of vintage America and the resourcefulness of forgotten foods and retro recipes. Ramen noodle. Before ramen noodles became the trendy late-night snack or the go-to for budget-conscious college students, they were simply a cheap and easy meal solution for families struggling to stretch a dollar. First introduced in the US in the late 1950s, ramen quickly became a symbol of resourcefulness. A pack of noodles could be bought for mere cents, making it one of the most affordable meal options available. Despite their low cost, ramen noodles weren't exactly a culinary marvel, but they offered quick preparation and versatility, two qualities vital for busy households. For families with little time or money to spare, ramen became a lifeline. Sometimes dressed up with leftover vegetables or bits of meat, the secret ingredient was creativity. Although not the healthiest option on the shelf, ramen provided carbohydrates and some protein, and when combined with other ingredients, it could form a more balanced meal. This dish, a true relic of retro recipes, remains a blank canvas for experimentation in classic Americana. Scrapple. Scrapple is a meat pudding made from trimmings and scraps combined with pork loaf and cornmeal to create a dish with a unique, grainy texture. Made primarily from pork fat, scrapple has long been a staple in mid-Atlantic regions. Whether you found yourself in the bustling streets of New Jersey amidst Virginia's deli foods, or in Delaware where a decent meal was hard to come by, scrapple was a budget-friendly diner favorite. Originally a European dish popularized by settlers, especially in Pennsylvania, a hub for German immigrants, scrapple remains a nostalgic reminder for those who grew up during World War II of the resourceful cooking and humble beginnings that defined classic Americana. Mock fish fillets. For those craving seafood without the expense, mock fish fillets offered an innovative solution. This dish, part of the retro recipes cherished by Gen X and others, didn't actually use fish. Instead, it imitated the texture and flavor by combining boiling milk, ground rice, chopped onion, and leeks with a properly beaten egg stirred in at the end. The result was an excellent mimicry that felt close enough to the real thing while providing a distinct experience. Although today the recipe has found favor in vegan communities, its origins lie in a time when making do with what was available was essential, a clever substitute for actual fish and chips in classic Americana. Blini with canned fish. Ever heard of eating pancakes with seafood? Blini with canned fish made that possible back in the 1960s, during a time when retro recipes and forgotten foods were born out of necessity. Much like pairing waffles with chicken in modern times, these thin, delicate pancakes, staples in Russian cuisine for centuries, were given a new twist by pairing them with canned fish. Canned fish, with its long shelf life, was perfect when fresh ingredients were hard to come by. The blini were made from a simple batter of flour, eggs, milk, and a touch of salt. Originating in coastal areas of Russia, this dish traveled far and wide, becoming a unique representation of the resourcefulness of vintage family meals. Pinto beans and rice. Few food combinations have stood the test of time like pinto beans and rice, a meal that could be made in large batches and stretched over multiple days. In the 1960s, pinto beans were cheap, easy to store, and packed with nutrients, while rice, a pantry staple, paired perfectly with them to create a filling dish. This recipe was all about stretching what you had and using creativity to turn simple ingredients into a hearty meal. Whether flavored with onions, garlic, or a dash of hot sauce, pinto beans and rice could be adapted in many ways, with leftover meat sometimes added for extra flavor. Nutritionally, the beans provided protein, fiber, and essential vitamins like folate and iron, while rice delivered energy through carbohydrates. This well-rounded meal is a cultural touchstone found in households across the country, from southern kitchens to southwestern tables, and speaks to the enduring spirit of vintage America, echoing the nostalgia and resourcefulness of classic Americana when times were tight. Stuffed cucumber boats, in a creative twist emblematic of vintage family meals, stuffed cucumber boats emerged as an inventive, budget-friendly option. Cucumbers, abundant and inexpensive, served as the perfect vessel for whatever was available in the pantry. This quick, easy-to-assemble dish could be filled with a variety of ingredients like tuna, egg salad, or even leftover meat. The beauty of these cucumber boats lay in their versatility. Cucumbers provided hydration and vitamins, while the fillings offered protein, healthy fats, and other essential nutrients. Light, refreshing, and functional, this dish was ideal for hot days when cooking felt like too much effort. For many who lived through the 1960s and later decades, stuffed cucumber boats evoke memories of inventive meals and households with bountiful gardens, a frugal yet satisfying solution when expensive ingredients were out of reach, capturing the simplicity and resilience of classic Americana. Carrot dogs. When inventive cooks were forced to think outside the box, carrot dogs became an unlikely substitute for hot dogs, a perfect example of forgotten foods reinvented. Carrot dogs were created by marinating and grilling carrots to mimic the texture and taste of popular sausages. Not only did they cost a fraction of the price of real meat, but they also made use of abundant produce from local markets or home gardens. Naturally packed with vitamins like A and potassium, carrots delivered a nutritional punch, and when marinated in spices such as paprika, garlic, and mustard, they acquired a savory flavor that deceived the senses. Carrot dogs turned out to be a surprisingly satisfying meal. In addition to being economical, they serve as a nostalgic reminder of simpler times when families relied on their creativity to produce affordable, fulfilling meals, a sentiment cherished by Gen X and others who recall the ingenuity of classic Americana. Saltine cracker pizza. Saltine cracker pizza was born out of necessity and limited resources, yet carried a desire for something indulgent. Families discovered that they could transform saltine crackers, cheap, crunchy, and ubiquitous pantry items, into a makeshift pizza. With just a layer of tomato sauce, some shredded cheese, and a sprinkle of seasoning, these simple crackers turned into a snack resembling pizza at a fraction of the cost. Nutritionally, it wasn't a balanced meal. The crackers were rich in sodium, the cheese added a bit of protein, and the sauce paid homage to traditional pizza flavors. For many, saltine cracker pizza holds a strong nostalgia factor, a go-to snack in households where money was tight, yet parents still wished to provide something fun for their kids. Its cultural significance lies in its ingenuity, a reminder that with just a few basic ingredients, people in vintage America could create comfort in simplicity. Milk toast. Milk toast proved that even the simplest combination, bread and milk, could be transformed into a meal to satisfy hunger and soothe the soul. This humble dish was often the fallback when food was scarce or funds were tight. At its core, it was just toasted bread dunked in warm milk. Yet, like many resourceful meals of the 1960s, it served as a life raft during lean years. The affordability of milk and bread made it accessible to most families, especially during economic hardships reminiscent of the Great Depression. While not nutritionally robust, milk toast provided a modest dose of calcium and carbohydrates, and a touch of sweetness if sugar was added. For many, this dish is a nostalgic comfort, evoking memories of being tucked in after a long day, a cultural symbol of a time when ingenuity thrived and families who couldn't afford elaborate meals still found creative ways to make do. Milk toast remains a quiet testament to the fabric of American resilience and the enduring legacy of classic Americana. Spam and eggs. Born out of wartime ingenuity and embraced by post-war kitchens, Spam was the ultimate culinary utility player with its long shelf life, low cost, and endless versatility. It found its way into dishes of every kind, and pairing it with eggs became a breakfast staple for families on a budget. A true nod to the 1960s and the golden age of retro recipes. Introduced during World War II as a protein-packed ration, Spam was an affordable option for households that couldn't always afford fresh meat. A single can could be sliced, diced, or fried, transforming a little into a lot. When combined with eggs, another inexpensive and widely available food, you had a hearty, protein-filled meal that stuck to your ribs without sticking to your wallet. Nutritionally speaking, it wasn't a perfect meal. Spam's high sodium and fat content might make a dietitian cringe, but it delivered plenty of calories and protein, which were often all that mattered at the time. Add in the eggs with their rich source of nutrients like vitamin D and iron, and you had a plate of energy to start the day. For those who grew up in the 1960s, the sizzle of Spam in a frying pan is as nostalgic as a black and white TV. An echo of the classic Americana era that still resonates in the 1970s and 1980s. Hot dogs and beans. Few combinations are as iconic in the realm of quick, budget-friendly meals as hot dogs and beans. Hot dogs were cheap, accessible, and could be stretched into multiple meals, while canned beans, a pantry staple, required little more than a thorough heat-up. Together, they created a meal that was both filling and practical. Hot dogs might not have been the pinnacle of nutritional excellence, but they delivered a good dose of protein and calories, and the beans provided fiber and a hint of vitamins. It wasn't a superfood combination by any stretch, but when you're trying to make the most of what you've got, it did the trick. Over time, this pairing became a cultural icon of frugality, a meal fondly remembered by kids after school, at picnics, or even at ball games, resonating with the nostalgia of vintage America and the resilience of classic Americana. Gooey butter cake. Among the era's sweet treats, gooey butter cake stood out as the ultimate dessert. Why was it so loved? First, it was affordable, a perfect fit for potlucks, bake sales, and family gatherings. Its simple ingredients, flour, sugar, eggs, and heaps of butter, meant anyone could whip it up, even during tough times. But let's be real, it's the rich, buttery taste and that incredible gooey texture that make this cake unforgettable. After a long summer day, a slice of this indulgent dessert was just the thing to revive your spirits. Sure, it's heavy on butter, maybe more than your doctor would recommend, but sometimes flavor wins over caution. It's believed the recipe traces back to German and Eastern European immigrants who made St. Louis their home. The cake's popularity became so synonymous with the city that it earned the name St. Louis Gooey Butter Cake, and it truly lives up to that title. The gooey, velvety filling is a slice of heaven, one that tourists often seek out and locals can't seem to resist. Before we move to the next dish, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Your support means a lot for my small channel. Deviled ham sandwiches, similarly. Deviled ham sandwiches gained prominence in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Deviled ham is made by grinding ham and mixing it with spices like hot sauce, cayenne pepper, or mustard to add a zesty flavor. The term deviled refers to the addition of spicy seasonings to food, a practice dating back to the 18th century. The William Underwood Company, established in Boston in 1822, began producing deviled ham in 1868. Their product became known for its long shelf life and distinctive devil logo, which is one of the oldest food trademarks in the US. To make a deviled ham sandwich, mix ground ham with mayonnaise, mustard, and spices to taste. Spread the mixture onto bread, optionally adding lettuce or pickles for extra texture and flavor. Pepperoni rolls. A truly iconic snack in classic Americana, pepperoni rolls are beloved especially in West Virginia, where many credit their roots to Italian immigrant communities that settled in the region. This dish is a testament to the trend of Americans embracing Italian and French flavors, and it was a common choice among miners in towns known for mining. Pepperoni rolls remained popular through the 1980s as a budget-friendly meal option during economic downturns. Their portability made them a go-to for busy families and workers in need of quick, affordable lunches. Unlike pricier deli meats or elaborate sandwiches, these rolls offered a satisfying blend of protein, carbohydrates, and flavor at a low cost. With excellent shelf stability, they could be packed ahead for school lunches, road trips, or shift work. Made from a typical pastry dough and stuffed to the brim with cheese and pepperoni, they became a staple in local bakeries, with both to-go versions in convenience stores and fancier options served in restaurants, capturing the golden age of retro recipes. Boiled hot dog soup. A shining example of resourcefulness in vintage America. Boiled hot dog soup shows that creativity can go a long way when you're working with limited ingredients. In the 1960s, when every dollar counted and families relied on the good old days of retro recipes, hot dogs, an inexpensive protein option, were boiled in water along with whatever vegetables or seasonings could be scrounged up. Affordability was a key factor in the popularity of this dish. Hot dogs were cheap, and by adding basic vegetables or even pasta, the meal was stretched even further. This accessible recipe catered to families living paycheck to paycheck during lean years, turning a simple processed meat into a warm, filling meal. Nutritionally, it wasn't exactly a superfood, but boiled hot dog soup provided protein, carbohydrates, and vitamins from any added veggies. For many who grew up in the 1960s, 1970s, or 1980s, this soup carries a strong sense of nostalgia, a reminder of childhood dinners on cold evenings when money was tight. Culturally, it reflects the resilience of American families who made do with modest ingredients, a classic Americana tale of turning forgotten foods into comforting vintage family meals. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment down below telling us your favorite recipes. Thanks for watching.